Ah,
To say hello. Hello? Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I guess we are in a room and nobody has told us. It's not one of those things where they say action. So action. Action to me. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marie Hamora, and I'm a filmmaker and the founder of Cinema Sala, which is a screening workshop series that showcases Filipinx works from the film and performing arts industry. Happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and welcome to the first ever LA Asian Pacific Film Festival Virtual Showcase presented by Visual Communications. From celebrating our histories and cultures to mobilizing our communities to be socially and politically active, we present the visual showcase to keep us connected. This showcase is take two. This showcase is brought to you by our partners at Comcast, NBC Universal, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Nielsen, HBO and Warner Media, National Geographic, and as always, for more info, please visit vcmedia.org. Today's discussion is Cinema Sala presents Amped Up. Amped Up. I don't know, I'm not amped up. I am amped up. Big thanks to tonight's community partners, BEATROCK Music, FilAm Arts, and Long Distance. I am so excited because I wanted to have this panel last March, but as you know, the world happened and we had to postpone, but I'm very happy it finally got to happen today, because these are the women whose works I've really much admired, and I haven't had Cinema Sala since I was pregnant and gave birth. So this is actually almost like a year in the making that I've wanted to share these amazing works. So I would like to go around the room and have each of the panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the work that they brought in today. I'd like to start with Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess Della Merced. I'm a writer-director from San Francisco. Today I'm going to be showing my thesis film from NYU called HYPEBEASTS. I made the film 8 years ago and it's still scarily really relevant today, which is sad, but I'm excited to revisit it with you guys. So thanks for tuning in.
Great. Let's go to Paola next.
Hi, I'm Paola Mardo. I'm a podcast producer in Los Angeles, hence the microphone. The works that I'm sharing for this panel are two things. One is a podcast episode called From the Frontlines, which is on long distance, and it was basically a series of conversations with healthcare workers and hospitality workers on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic. And I'm sharing also the short documentary video we made for the first episode of this season, CENDRILLON, which is about, or how do I say this? A pioneering Filipino restaurant in New York, CENDRILLON, and kind of the cooking philosophy behind CENDRILLON, and also the owners, Amy Bessa and Romy Dorotan. So super excited to share, because that was actually the first episode of the podcast, and then Calls from the Frontlines was the very last. So it's really cool to kind of share both those things with you guys today. So I'm excited to talk about it.
And for those who don't know, could you tell them what Long Distance is about?
Yes, Long Distance is a podcast about stories in the Filipino diaspora. That's kind of the tagline I use. I think it sums it up pretty well, but honestly, they're just stories to me that I find interesting and relevant to the Filipino community, whether you're in the US or anywhere in the world.
Amazing. I would like to go next to Evelyn Obamos and Ruby Ibarra, who are the co-directors behind Nothing on Us, PINAYS Rising. Go ahead. Ruby, why don't you start?
So first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. Evelyn and I are, of course, super blessed and super proud to have our film included in such a group of, amazing women. I just want to first off say that I'm a big fan of everyone that's on the panel. I've been fortunate enough to have met everybody already, so big fan of everyone. And so for those of you who don't know me, who are tuned in right now, I'm a musician from the Bay Area. I came out with an album called Circa 91 through BEATROCK music in 2017. And I really think that, that was the start of me taking my career more professionally and me diving into more different artistic endeavors outside of just rap music. Hopefully, if you all have had the chance to watch our documentary, specifically with Nothing on Us, PINAYS Rising, it was really one of my first moments where, I got to have a chance to collaborate and at the same time also work behind the scenes with, amazing Pinay directors such as Evelyn Obamos, and basically create, a piece of film that captured not only just behind the scenes, but I'd like to think also a story of an experience of a movement that I think that we created back in 2018 when we made the Us music video. But yeah, since then, I've been touring across the nation, even had the chance to bring my music back to the Philippines with my band and with Evelyn as well last year. And just hoping for more film projects as well. As much as I find myself to be an MC first and foremost, I definitely want to continue exploring storytelling and imagery through film, because as I think what a lot of the women on the panel can also agree on is that there's a different power through the avenue of moving imagery of film that I think can't necessarily be captured just through lyrics alone. So I'm definitely excited, looking forward to directing more and making more documentaries as well.
Amazing. Evelyn?
Aloha, hafade, and kamusta. My name is Evelyn Obamos. I'm an island-born city girl representing Guam, the Philippines, Hawaii, and have lived in the Bay Area for going on 12 years. So it's been a huge benefit to being in this community, being among the likes of many folks on this call who are also from the Bay, and more recently being able to work more closely with Ruby in these last 2 years. As she mentioned, we released this documentary. It world premiered in 2018 at CAMFest, the largest Asian American film festival. And we were able to take this film to 10 cities in 3 countries and counting. So this is our first virtual streaming experience, which we're very glad to be part of. And echoing what Ruby said, huge fan of all the women Pinays on this call. So don't mind us if we're fangirling the whole time.
And last but definitely not least, Tess, please talk about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I love that intro. Please talk about yourself. I'm Tess Paras. I'm primarily an actor based in Los Angeles, but I also write and direct. As far as acting, some of you watching might recognize me from the Aswang episode of NBC's Grimm, which brought the first Filipino American storyline to network TV. I also played Jay Chan on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and more recently, I'm on a show called Just Add Magic Mystery City that's on Amazon after I was a recurring character on Just Add Magic, which is the flagship series on the show. But I also write and direct. I'm the associate director for the CBS Diversity Showcase here in LA. And this film that I'm bringing to everyone in this showcase today is The Patients. It's my short film directorial debut. I also wrote it and star in it alongside John Briones, Eugene Cordero, Melody Butu. It made its premiere last year at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, and I was really grateful for that opportunity, and now I'm even more grateful to be able to share it online. I'm really curious to the reactions that folks have had to the film, especially since it's been a really interesting year to see how, as it's screened in multiple places, what the reaction has been like. So I'm just really interested to have the opportunity to share with the virtual audience right now and hear everyone's feedback and what resonated with them.
Amazing. This is an amazing group of people, and I can't wait to dive in. So the first question, I kind of want to start like a warm up for everybody, because what I find exemplary with all of you is that you're so fearless to share your stories, period. But in addition to that, also be the face of them. And that's something that I cannot do. And that's why I find you all very fearless. And so my first question is about your artistic journey in knowing that you not only had a story to tell, but you wanted to be the face of your stories. You want it to be in front of the camera, not just behind the camera. And when it comes to you, Paola, like when I say camera, I mean your microphone, and same goes for you, Ruby. And then we can go on the same order as a while ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for me, I've always loved movies since I was little. And it wasn't until high school that I realized I could make them. I like didn't put two and two together. But I actually wanted to start as an actor. I wanted to be on SNL. I started in comedy, quickly dropped that dream. Maybe I'll revisit it another day. But in high school, I really fell in love with just watching films, especially dramatic ones. And so I went to school for it at UC Irvine. I studied film and media studies there, and just really like learned everything about the history, like theory. And I thought that was a really great background, but I still wanted to act, and but doing drama was like too much at the time. So I just realized I could make my own movies, put myself in them, and start an education that way. And then right after that, I went to NYU for grad school, and I just like really went with that goal of making movies that I could be in, and just like pursue that 100%. So just been doing that for a really long time. So tired. Just kidding. But yeah, it's I like doing it. People always ask like, how can you do both? Like, shouldn't you just focus on one? Like maybe one thing will suffer if you don't do the other, if you do both. So I'm trying to get to a place where I can do both confidently and not have to keep answering that question. So
Yeah. So for me as a podcast producer, I mean, obviously podcasts really only came up like in the last 15 years or something, but only in the last maybe 10 or less. They've been really popular. But I got into this, honestly, my background, I did a bunch of random stuff, film, theater. I wanted to be a writer, like all sorts of stuff. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that I realized like, oh, I listen to public radio every day and actually really like it. Kind of like Jess, like I didn't see radio as a job that I could do. And then podcasts, I remember listening to Serial on a drive like from the Bay Area to LA, and like binge listening to that and thinking like, this is amazing. Like this kind of storytelling is so intimate. And I was really just intrigued in how they were able to put that together. But it wasn't until later that I realized like, why don't I just try it? I bought a cheap mic on Amazon. I, taught myself how to use GarageBand because that's all I had on my Mac. And then I just started interviewing my friends for a little talk show I did. Fun fact, Tess Paras was one of the first people I interviewed in my dining room. Thank you for doing that. But really, actually, so it was a show called F This Weekly. I mean, it was at the time I was working in marketing and publicity at a film studio, and I was just really frustrated with like working on movies that I wasn't interested in, that didn't represent like what I wanted to, be a part of. And I was like, I know people like Tess, I know other people who are doing like really cool, amazing things in film and TV and like new media. Why don't I do like a podcast where I talk to them about their work? So that's kind of how I just started in the podcast world, I guess. And from there, I realized like, or I started to think about what kinds of stories do I really want to tell. And, I actually, my background is I was born in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Manila, lived in Malaysia for a little bit, lived in the Bay Area. And then after college, moved back to LA. And when I moved back to LA, I realized like, or I found out that I was born actually in historic Filipino town in Los Angeles. And I was like, what is this place? I don't know what this is. And that curiosity and that wanting to know like, the history behind the Filipino community in LA, that turned into long distance. But it was like a years long process of interviewing people in the community, getting comfortable with learning how to talk to people. And, in audio, I mean, similar to, film documentary, it's like you get really personal with the people you talk to. And I don't know what it is about not having a camera in front of people's faces, but they almost don't feel like they feel like they can open up a little bit more because it's less formal, I think. I don't know. The documentary folks might have other ideas, but like getting comfortable with that and like just kind of like, playing around with editing and styles and things in podcasting. That's what I've loved about what I do, and every day is like a chance to learn and just get better at it.
Ruby?
And so for me, when I think about my career, it's definitely been a long journey. It's definitely been far from something that's happened overnight. When I think about specifically my rap career, it definitely traces back to, me being in elementary and listening to Francis Magalona's Yo record. Like that was my very, very first introduction to hip hop. Listening to mga kababayan ko, being 5 years old and memorizing that in verbatim, because that was the only piece of music that my mom brought from the Philippines when we migrated to California as a family. And then from there, my family, we settled in the Bay Area. So it was only natural that I would fall in love with hip hop even more. This is the place where hieroglyphics, E40, West Coast, even Pac, this is the land of, where all these iconic figures in hip hop thrived and really made a name for themselves and shifted what would become hip hop throughout the 90s. And so naturally I gravitated towards that genre. But I think the moment that I really wanted to be a writer or a person contributing to the genre was when I was introduced to Lauryn Hill's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I tell people all the time, without this album, I feel like it was the soundtrack to my teenage years and eventually what would help me find my identity as a woman of color living in America. And so after hearing that album, I was like, okay, I want to be like Lauryn. I want to do it too. I need to write my own rhymes. And I remember I would write it in my notebook, like throughout middle school and high school. And it wasn't until I think around my freshman year of high school that I saved up my lunch money for about half the school year. I survived on eating Doritos, or hot Cheetos and flavored water. Like that's all I ate for a good 6 months. And finally, when I gathered $100, I went to the Radio Shack at my nearest mall in the East Bay, and I bought this dynamic microphone, plugged it into my computer, and right then and there, I recorded my first piece of work. And I think I was fortunate in my field of work that I grew up in a time where, all these resources were already available to me, where I could easily upload my content online and have an audience immediately. Things like SoundCloud already existed. So it was fairly easy for me to delete or remove that middleman that existed prior, where, you have to submit a demo tape to even get your music heard. With the rise of the internet and all these social media platforms, it definitely helped me connect to the people who would become my audience. And to answer your question earlier about how did I know I wanted to be in front of the camera and I guess not necessarily be a writer anymore, growing up for me, especially as a Pinay and not seeing faces that look like this, not hearing voices that are normalized, that, this is part of mainstream media, I never really, I think, consciously thought that I want to be in front of the camera. I want to be, the main artist in my music. If anything, I saw myself, and I've always seen myself as a writer first before even as a performer. I think I've just, as a Pinay, have been socialized to believe that I'm not what America sees in being in front of the microphone or being the main artist on stage. I've always seen myself as being part of the background. And I think as a kid early on, that's why I was already interested in, being behind the camera. I remember as a kid, me and my sister, we also used our webcam to create very silly videos and put them up on YouTube. And I never thought, at the time that this would essentially become practice for later on when I would want to create actual legitimate content to coincide with my music. And when it comes to videos too, I've always been a fan of music videos. I grew up watching a lot of Missy Elliott, Busta Rhymes, and seeing those imagery as a kid, watching it on MTV after school. I was just completely amazed at how you could tell a story, powerful stories also through images. And that's essentially what I want to capture now, I think, with my work, is that how do I make my music identifiable with my audience, but at the same time, how can I translate those lyrics and make the storytelling even more powerful with video. So that's been my journey, and it's definitely continuing. Yeah, again, hoping to make more videos soon.
Can I just say, every time I'm on an all Pinay panel, I just get so in awe of how many side hustles everyone has. And I just feel like part of our identity is probably being serial hobbyists and being resourceful in the process of acquiring more of those talents. And so it's just super honorable to be on here. I'd say that the acquisition of developing film started when I was in high school also, so similar to Jessica. And high school for me was at the time when Ruby was just describing, a lot of the folks that we were watching were also on YouTube. And I remember the renaissance, the cultural renaissance of a lot of Filipino American, Asian American YouTubers. And this was huge for me because growing up on an island, you sometimes feel so far removed from where everything is happening. And here we are on the internet, able to completely remove the distance between access to being able to see that kind of content and seeing more representation. And I remember thinking, like, how cool is this? And I'm going to give a shout out to my media program, but Saber Media was my sanctuary. I would spend hours on end after school, and my teacher was kind enough to let us even come on the weekends to go to the edit bays. And we would work with some of the most cheap ass equipment, but we would produce content that we felt represented our stories. And it was a bunch of me and my best friends from high school, and we just entered every single Hawaii film festival we could. And at the time, I don't think my school had the best reputation on Hawaii. It was one of those public schools. And here we were on the news, and they were talking about how Campbell High School has trophies lined up in our video room because we were just killing it. We just started winning every single contest. People started donating money to the program. And at that point, I recognized the power of being able to tell that story. And to Ruby's point, bring the marginalized narratives to the forefront of people and of the folks who want to hear their stories. And if anything, this Nothing on Us documentary reinforced that there is power in wanting to see your voice amplified. And what more better way to do that than with a bunch of people who look like you. So that was where my story started from. And although film is not my full-time job, I will say it takes up a lot of time, close enough to my full-time job and on the side.
Cool. Is it my turn?
Oh yeah, totally, it's your turn. And for you, it's actually the reverse. Like, you're usually in front of the camera, and then what made you, like, you know, the origin story of what made you go behind the camera?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as an actor, I mean, I've been acting for about a decade now, and professionally about a decade now. And it's, I started in comedy, and I think that's really where I found my voice as a creator. I mean, as we're all talking here and hearing how multidisciplinary everyone is, it all kind of layered in for me. So, you know, I like Jess was an NYU grad, and I was doing a lot of theater in New York and then regional theater and traveling around. I wanted to do comedy, and then through comedy I found sketch comedy and an ability to start putting videos, like Evelyn said, on YouTube. And so in 2014, I had a video that I did go viral for the first time called Typecast. And that was a commentary and satire about representation in the media. And the very first line of the song portion of that video was, "I'm gonna play the white girl's nerdy friend." And that was something that I was told so much through acting. In my industry, they're like, yeah, that's what you're gonna do. And every audition that I had, I was like, okay, the audition is for the white girl's nerdy friend. Okay, great, got it. And as an Asian American woman, as a Pinay in comedy, that was basically it. Always, that was my choice, and that was and it taught me to not wait. That taught me that I needed to make my own stuff, because otherwise, this is what I was going to be served, and that's not necessarily the meal that I want. And from then on, it really started to, I saw that was resonating. I saw that I had a skill in that area, and it was really helpful that I had a lot of mentors. What I'm really thankful for, at least in the comedy community, in the Asian American comedy community, it's really close knit and folks really help each other, and like the film community too. You share resources, you tell everyone, you know, you cheer each other on, you lift as you climb, you bring people up with you. So I was able to get a job producing sketch comedy videos over at Fusion, and I was my full-time job. I was like, it's my full-time job to put my face in front of the camera and make these satirical videos and these shorts. And it just really taught me on the job. I was working with people who I was just so enamored to be in that room with them as a writer. I was like, these are people who were writing for, you know, other huge comics, from The Soup, from Amy Schumer, from like, and from learning from the top down from all these people who are really good at their job. And I was the only Filipino in that room. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and make my own video. And then I went viral with another video called Make Your Face Great Again. And this was the trumping makeup tutorial. So this is just to talk about how like random my career is that I come from comedy, I come from acting, but at the same time, all along the way, I'm learning how to write succinctly. I'm learning how video production works. I'm learning from everyone around me who's helping, you know, to shout out to Paola's partner, Patrick, who is very much like my NYU kuya when I came to LA, and I like asked him a bunch of stupid questions of how to do this. And with that, every step of the way, I was always constantly learning. And when I was able to make this short with the patients, that was something that came from, I had a bunch of different, you know, actors who I was talking to, and we were, you know, everyone was encouraging me, and I was like, I have this half idea. I don't know what to do with it. And then I had this moment with my mom in real life, because The Patients is based on a true story, my own personal story of myself and also my family and conversations that I've had with them. And I felt like I had the means at that moment. There was a slice in time where I had the means to do it. And I thought I had to capitalize on that, because I had, you know, the actors, like I had John, who was like, I can give you 2 days. And Eugene was like, I can give you 1 day. And I was like, all right, then I guess I have to do this then, like right now in this time. And figure out how to make it work and get scrappy. And it sounds like, you know, everyone in this panel knows exactly what I mean by that, because you know how to make something happen with whatever you're given. You know, you've been watching the Us documentary and seeing y'all do that video in 2 days, like all that sort of stuff. We all have that within us, and we're all there to encourage each other. And that's how The Patients was born, really, was I had this idea of like, I needed to do this now. I feel the message and the conceit of the film was important then and there, because it was a slice of the #MeToo movement that I wasn't seeing. I wasn't seeing people talk about what happens next after I post my story online. What is it like speaking with your family after that? Like, all of a sudden you can say this to the world, but like, what does happen when your mom calls and goes, what's #MeToo? What are you doing? What are you putting that on the internet for? And what happens from there. So it was really just capitalizing on like, okay, here's the tools in my toolbox. Like, this is what I've learned from doing video, from producing, from doing sketch comedy, from doing all that. How do I put my voice into this moment in time with the people I have and have it all come together? And I really am thankful for all of it coming together in that moment, and just, again, like capitalizing on it. I'm like, I got to do it now. And I had to make it happen.
That's amazing. And I feel that because a lot of filmmaking is follow through, like everybody can get a good idea, but it's really in the execution and follow through which sets people apart. I'm gonna start talking about individual works, and since, you know, we're kind of halfway through and I haven't even gone through half of my questions, I'm starting to slash all my questions and sort of like going through like maybe the most top shelf things. So I'm gonna just start, and then with these, I'm just gonna ask maybe less about the process of the work, but more about the impact about with your works, because I think all of your work is so relevant today. And I want to also leave it open to questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with Ruby and Evelyn, because like with both the video and the documentary, like in you, like you see, and I want to quote this because I found this like so powerful. Like the pride and power found in, it is about the pride and power found in being an island woman and the desire to share Filipina culture with the world. And I absolutely love that. And that's exactly what you have achieved. And what I want to know is like when you share, like I want to know the reception that you've gotten from both the doc and the video when you shared it in the film festivals, and of course with your fans all over. What is the response that you've been getting? Because I think that not a lot of people know that Filipino Americans are the third largest Asian Americans here because we are so invisible. And I feel that your video and doc makes us visible. And so I want to like open that up to you too.
So that's a big question, because even to this day, the response that we get for both the documentary and the Us music video has been beyond anything I could have imagined or planned for. To speak on the music video first, I remember the first day that we uploaded it, it was like wildfire. We put it up on YouTube around midnight. And by morning when I woke up, I was just getting constant notifications of people sharing it. And even to this day, I mean, you know, it's even reached, you know, the eyes of Maria Ressa or some other, obviously other iconic PINAYS that we're just big fans of, who we've been admiring for so many years, that have also shared it on their platforms. And just to know the people that it's reached, and even beyond the Filipino American community, there's also been, you know, people, other communities of color that have talked about how the music video and the song have been significant to them, because, you know, it might not be, I think what the video and the documentary showed essentially was that, you know, here are faces and here are voices of people who aren't normally pushed to the forefront, who don't normally even have a voice to share their story. And, you know, we're also seeing at the same time a community coming together, a sisterhood, a bond that I feel like we captured through the behind the scenes. And hopefully, you know, with people watching the documentary, they can also see that with everything from the music to the video to the doc, it really was a community effort. You know, none of these things, these projects that we've done have come solely from one person. You know, I think we kind of addressed this in the beginning, how I think is oftentimes as creatives, we have to wear multiple hats, but I've come to find after the documentary is that, you know, we're like we have to take so many things on our plate and we have to output so many things on our own. What I learned from this whole experience is that it's much more stronger and powerful when you are working with community and you are working with people, you know, that have your back. Because like Tess mentioned, at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to build a foundation strong enough that, you know, we're helping each other rise at the same time. And it's not just one person getting to the top, because that's not going to help and strengthen the community. It's going to take all of us helping each other to rise up.
Anecdotally, to Ruby's point about the reception, I remember when Ruby Veridiano, who's this fashion icon, who's Pinay from the Bay Area, but lives out of Paris. And she sent us a video with her and her Pinay friends watching from the Paris Film Festival. And I remember just being like, wow, this video is overseas. And it wasn't just in Paris, it was in Australia. People were messaging us. It was in Toronto when I went to the Toronto Real Asian Film Festival. And actually I got to hang out with Patrick in Philly or was it Boston, for the Boston Asian American Film Festival. And there's just like so many of these stories and these narratives that, to Paola's point earlier, the diaspora is real, and taking the film around the world really proved that narrative exists. And there's people who have the appetite to want to see it and want to discuss it. In Toronto, I hung out with these Pinay artists who were based out of Kensington Market. And there's like a collective out there. They hung out with me after the film and like organized this artist meetup. Never met those girls in my life. It was our first day hanging out and we all just like instantly clicked. It felt like I was hanging out with a bunch of friends I've known forever. And I think that's the power in these narratives, and why we need more of them is recognizing that we're not alone, and there are pockets of the world where they're still not getting enough we're fortunate to be in the Bay, where we do make up half of that 4 million. Half of the total Filipino population in California, which is closer to like 600,000. But it's incredible, and I hope that this message does not stop ringing.
Amazing. So some questions are starting to come in, and what's great about it is that it links to who I was going to talk to next. So it all works out. So Jess, I'm going to read you the question, and I'm going to add my own question at the end. So I just want to overwhelm you. So Kappa Psi Epsilon Alpha chapter says to Jess, "We loved your film, all caps. What was one of the biggest challenges and memorable lessons / moments from the film?" That's the first question, and then I'm gonna have a follow-up question after that.
Let's see. So it was a long time ago that I shot this, but the thing that I remember the most that was the hardest was that we shot all overnight, 7 days in a row, in New York City on Orchard Street with like hundreds of extras, and it was a really like physical experience, because like I was directing and I was acting in it, so it was just like another hat that I had to wear, but luckily I had a really, really great crew who had my back, and I think that's what I learned, because before that movie I kind of did everything really scrappily, because like you're in film school, like you have to like learn how to just do everything. But with this, my thesis, like I really wanted to like surround myself with people who are professionals, who know what they're doing, so I don't have to like micromanage and like put on too much on my shoulders. So I think learning from that experience, like, oh yeah, you're supposed to make this movie with other people, like you're supposed to focus on what you're supposed to do. But yeah, the film was really physically challenging, and also like being in it and like going through those circumstances is also like emotionally taxing too. So I think that was the hardest, but I mean, it was really fun too. So I don't regret anything. The thing that I learned from that, I think just surrounding yourself, especially if you're gonna act on camera, you have to have a set of eyes, actually more than one set of eyes, just watching for technical stuff, things that you like wouldn't happen to catch because you're in the movie. So that's where I like really learned like, oh, this is how I should be doing it from now on. But yeah.
That's great. And also like, I think that film, I mean, sometimes films also get better with age, and I feel that your film is just going to get better every year, because I think that it captures such a, I mean, the tension that you have in the film, and the things that you're juggling, the scenes that you're juggling, especially, and also acting in it. I just think that it's an amazing feat. It's an amazing short. And my question is like, it's relevant, especially now with all the racism happening because of COVID. And I wanted to ask like what your opinion is of like the impetus of you writing that, because of like the seed idea, and has things gotten better or worse in your opinion?
That's funny. When I wrote that, so the film is based on real events. So like I said, I went to UC Irvine. This was in 2012. I started writing it at the end of 2011. And I had like found out on Facebook that there's these 2 Asian kids who went to the Chick-fil-A in Irvine. Someone had written Ching and Chong on their receipts, and it like kind of went viral in the Asian community, nowhere else. And for me, like that was like a huge eye opener, because I was living in this little bubble in New York, making films and like not thinking about like anything, like, oh, racism doesn't exist, like we did it. But when that came out, I was like, oh fuck, because Irvine is like a really safe bubble also. So it was really surprising for me to know that this could happen in such a safe place. So that really started getting the gears turning. And then, so my advisor on this movie was Spike Lee. And so like that happened, and we were just like talking about stuff. We like talked about sports a lot. And that was the year that Jeremy Lin like got into the NBA and on the Knicks. And it was just like a was really exciting. Like Spike was really excited. Like he had all these t-shirts and stuff and he would like give them to me because like I was the only person who cared about that. And then like all of the racist shit started happening, like all the harassment against Jeremy, and like we would talk about that. And it was just like a lot for me for someone who just like wasn't thinking about this stuff. And I just really wanted to address this question of like, how do you address racism against Asians when people don't even like really see it? Like we always have to explain like these are microaggressions that are really affecting us. Like it's not black and white to you, but for us it's like it's huge. And so the characters in the movie are like my two sides of myself. Like you should stand up for yourself or you should just like let it go and be the bigger person, like which is the right one to do. And I still don't actually know the answer to that. So I think in that regard, the film has aged pretty well because more than ever, like I'm confronted with that question today. And not, I mean, it's not nice, but it's nice to know that now because the racism is so blatant against Asians, like I don't have to explain that it exists, you know? So like in that regard, I am grateful for that. But yeah, it's really strange. The reception of the film back then wasn't as great as I had hoped. And I knew that's because people didn't really think that like Asians face racism. And if we did, it wasn't like as bad as like other people. So yeah, it's pretty trippy to like watch that. I watched it again today for like the first time. I was like, oh, I gotta remember what this movie was about. I was like, oh shit, this is the exact same thing that I'm dealing with. Yeah, it's pretty sad, but I'm glad people are liking it.
I mean, yeah, be proud that you've made something that's so powerful and hopefully people can learn from it from years to come. I have to like rush through some things because I'm like, time is running out and also questions are coming in. But I wanted Paola to kind of talk about this also because it also intersects with your work and also your recent experience, which you also, you talked about in your podcast. So let's like go through like that issue because I do feel that it's something that us Asian Americans have to face for I think some time as the repercussions of COVID-19.
Yeah, it's funny. So, well, not totally funny. It's actually not funny at all. But, um, when basically I've just wrapped the second season of Long Distance, and it was supposed to go from November till around April. And as we were kind of working on the last episodes, the pandemic hit. And then I was like, oh, how can we release stories that have nothing to do with this moment right now? Because, like, all anyone is talking about is this because it's affecting all of our lives at every level. And I actually experienced coronavirus racism. Listen to the podcast. I won't get into it too much, but essentially, I was wearing a mask outdoors, and a woman approached me and just said something about like, "Oh my God, China brought the virus here," and it was just not pleasant at all. And I had heard of, I've experienced microaggressions and things like that before, but nothing to do with like a pandemic, and it reminded me a lot of honestly, Vincent Chin, if anyone's familiar, Chinese American man who was beaten to death in the 80s by some laid off auto workers who were mad about, the Japanese auto industry basically taking over the market. And he was Asian looking, but he was Chinese American. I mean, it was, that kind of thing resonates so much now. And there's actually a documentary about it by Renee Tajima Pena, which I think everybody should see. And that's why I did an episode about it. Going back to your earlier question, like I never really wanted to put myself in my work, but the nature of podcasting is, you're as a host, you are in it. I mean, there are pieces, especially in this season, that I've done that's mostly non-narrated, and I love doing that. But I think for this particular thing to talk about racism, I was like, well, it happened to me. I should talk about it. And I think that's the kind of cool thing about the podcast is that it's a show. It's like a TV show, but it's audio, and we're able to adapt to kind of what's going on in the world. So we did a episode about that. I interviewed a man, he's part of the Filipina American National Historical Society, Devin Cabanilla. He's up in Seattle. His 8-year-old son experienced racism at a Costco because he was wearing a mask. And I talked to him about what it was like to deal with your child experiencing racism for the first time and how to talk to your child about that, because that's the thing that I'm reading a lot about, actually. Asian American parents talking about like how like do I actually tell my kids about what this is, because they're actually having to face it right now. And then I also spoke with Phil Yu, Angry Asian Man, and the surprising thing he told me was, you always read about things like Vincent Chin, you always read about the historical stuff, the Manongs, etc., the racism they endured, but this was like the first time he was like, oh, it's actually happening to us on like a large scale, like right now. And I think, with the works that we all do, it's, sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm cooped up at home, I'm not really helping with like what's going on in the world, I'm not a frontline worker or an essential worker. But I think with what we all do, we can use storytelling, we can use film, documentary, podcasting, whatever, to like kind of bring those narratives to other people in our different mediums. So the podcast episode I shared for this particular panel has to do with the flip side of this pandemic, the effects of, the pandemic on Filipino healthcare workers and also hospitality workers, because they're all in the front lines. And I don't know, I think to do it in a podcast form, it allowed me to just call people. Like, it was very like bare bones. The audio quality isn't perfect, but I was able to speak to people just really one-on-one and like ask them like, what's going on? Are you experiencing racism at your work? Surprisingly, no. What I found was in the hospitals where they're needed, they haven't really experienced racism. It's when they're outside, they're not, in the hospital area, they're not needed. It's where they've kind of experienced a little bit. So yeah, it's great to have a medium in which we could talk about this stuff, but it's sad that we've had to like, incorporate this in our work.
I'm going to continue the sad more questions for one more round of questions, and then I'm going to make it, I promise we'll end on an uplifting note, but I want to talk about Tess's work right now, because another effect, like the reason why her work is really relevant right now is because the patience is about, one of the themes is about domestic abuse. And right now during quarantine, there's a rise of that right now. And I never even knew this term, but I was reading up about it, and they call it intimate terrorism. And I just wanted you to talk about that and kind of, what what you know about it, and how people can maybe, give some advice or something like that.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I feel appropriate giving advice. I think what I can speak to is my own experience. So the Patience is written because of my own experience with intimate partner violence. I had a partner in New York prior to moving to LA who was abusive and verbally, and as well as sexually abusive, and I had that is my own #MeToo story. And it speaks to kind of, to piggyback of what Paola was saying of how do we now discuss that experience when we need help or when we have experienced that in our lives. Personally, this time has been really difficult because, and I have brought this up with some other folks who are survivors in my own circle, and also in therapy, where because of the circumstances of the pandemic and people helping to shelter in place, it eliminates some elements of control out of our life, which very much echoes feeling controlled by a partner. And it echoes those same kind of traumatizing feelings. So I have definitely had, during the first month, I was experiencing those things, as far as like the same feelings would echo the same kind of response in like physiologically in my body. And then I'm having nightmares and sort of like small scale PTSD flashbacks where I was like, oh, the world isn't in my control right now. It reminds me of when I was with a partner who was controlling, and I, various things like, because, now we have to talk about and ask folks like at home of like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And like having to double check or like think twice about steps that you're going to do, that like double thinking twice, am I doing this right? Those types of feelings, those very much can echo what it's like to be in an abusive relationship of like double thinking yourself, or like feeling like you're having to doubt your own mind. I understand, like, with survivors, that we may be feeling those kinds of feelings right now, and you are not alone if you're one of those people who are like, this feels like I'm out of control. Even, I feel like, even in a very broad sense, the way this administration is handling it, if whatever kind of relationship you've been in and you feel like you've been gaslit before, where you're like, I'm not seeing things the right way, or, you know, or from the top down, they're like saying, the thing that you're seeing with your own eyes is not what you're seeing. Like, yes, there are deaths happening. Yes, you are not wearing a mask at a mask factory. I can see that with my own eyes. These are things that are coming up for a lot of us. And I couldn't imagine how terrible this experience would feel if you were in a relationship right now that was controlling or abusive. But I will say that there are resources online to try and help you with that. And I think that if you are experiencing any part of that journey, reach out and do your best to seek help. For me, I feel like it was so scary to go through that process of trying to reach out. Like, I was at the point where I had to call a hotline. And I was like, I think that something's wrong, but I can't even, I'm double checking my brain, being like, am I being abused? I'm not sure. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this a red flag? Is this, but I love this person. And so it does that to your head, where you can't even see if right is right. But, you know, if there are resources out there, I picked up the phone and I called someone, the character in The Patients. She looks up a website and she text chats. So if anything, those resources are available, and that's what I would say to folks. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact websites for everyone right now, and I probably should have had those on hand. But I will say, reach out, and there is help out there.
Thank you for saying that and for sharing that. That's very powerful. I want to lighten up the mood as we are wrapping up. And Bernard Badian, who is a good friend of most of the people here in this virtual room, I'm gonna just read it in his voice. He says, "You all are dope. Congrats on everything." And this is for everybody. And I want everybody to kind of to chime in what you think about this. Congrats on everything. How do y'all feel about the recent amount of Asian American content, but lack of anything led by Filipinx peeps?
Woo!
There's like, he just puts a bomb and just like runs away. It's a very good question.
I think I need a drink for this one.
I know.
Have a drink, Paola.
I mean, I will say that, hi, Bernard. I will say that you yourself included, Bernard, are part of the people who are here trying to fight that. I know everybody on this panel has projects in the works, and just like, you're ready to go when opportunity hits and there's money to back you and resources to back you. Like, everyone here is prolific in that way. And I think that I have a lot of hope, because for one thing, I see the demand for it. You know, as Ruby and Evelyn are saying, like, as soon as you put something out there, everyone is ready to see our brown faces, you know, like, everyone's wanting to see us in the forefront of the media. And I think people are ready for it. You know, when I put up my Seed and Spark to help fund this short, everyone was ready for it. We surpassed our goal. Like, you know, anytime somebody asks for help, like, folks are there. So that means that the audience is there. I think we need to be the ones driving the vehicle, like, that's for sure. And that's, you know, I think we need to be the ones who are there, you know, telling our own stories and having that say, and tapping those resources and having those voices, because everyone here is so, you know, so good at what they do, and so tapped into the right way to tell that story. And if they don't know the right way, they know how to find it and they know where to go. So that's what I will say about that. I think everyone's ready, and the audiences are ready.
Yes.
No, I agree with everything you said. I think it's really cool what's happening right now. There is a rise in Asian American content, but there's still not enough. Like it's motivating for me because I'm just like, oh, that doesn't represent me, but I can tell my story. So let me add to this. But things are changing, and it's a very exciting time. So I'm just excited for this pandemic to fucking stop already. So I can see my fucking movies. But yeah, I'm excited.
And
But I agree with that question. There definitely needs to be more brown representation. As much as we're seeing a rise in Asian Americans, whether it's through music, through K-pop or through movies like The Farewell or Crazy Rich Asians, which are all amazing films, I want to see more Filipino American stories. I want to see more Filipino American voices and faces. And I think ultimately it's going to be up to us. I know Tess mentioned this at the beginning of this panel. It's up to us, the creators, the creatives, the writers, the directors, who have the power in our hands to create those projects, because white Hollywood is not going to do that for us. We need to make these projects ourselves. And when I think about, representation, it's not just about putting a Filipino American at the end of the day in front of a camera. That's not going to solve anything. That's not going to help our community. There needs to be the intent and the authenticity needs to be there. So it's not just also about seeing more Filipino faces. There also needs to be more Filipino writers and directors behind the camera. We need to see it across the board, more representation, more visibility. But I do agree with what's already been said that, there is obviously a need for this. Every time there's content, people get excited. But I also want to say that when there are movies like, like this film festival, like this, what we've had all week, streaming our films, when we have actual content out there, I think it's also important for the audience, for our entire community to come out and support. When someone releases a film and it's available for streaming, go out and support it, stream it. When an artist releases a song, stream the song. We have to just continue supporting each other, because like I said, if these powers that be aren't going to open up the doors for us, we need to open up the doors for each other, and we need to support each other when there's actual content out there.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, obviously, I look at it more from the podcast perspective, but I also feel like with what we do, my fellow producer, Patrick Epino, who's been mentioned here way too many times, he and I, we make the documentary series Long Distance TV, which is basically short docs tied to podcast episodes. The reason we chose to do that was because we felt we wanted to show things visually from our stories, but also because we didn't see those things. Like, for example, we wanted to shoot Delano, this like historic Filipino community, and shoot it beautifully and show it to people who would never be able to get there. Last November, we were able to go to a place called St. Malo in Louisiana for an upcoming episode coming soon, which is basically the site of a really, really early, supposedly maybe the first, but we have yet to confirm, settlement of Filipinos in the US. Like way before Filipinos came to California, they were in Louisiana. And we got to go there on this janky boat. I almost got pneumonia. It was so cold. But we wanted to show, like, hey, this is us. This is our history. It's beautiful. It's something to be proud of. And I think, I think we were really lucky, and I'm really glad that we were supported by Google Podcasts for season 2. And, it's great to have that kind of acknowledgement and the funding. But at the end of the day, it's like, you got to just go and do it. And, do it for your community, build your audience, and, all the other stuff will come later. I really believe that because I have worked in the industry system. I have worked, at a studio, and it's really hard to break into that. Even now, I feel but if you are continually working on what it is you're doing, the stories that you're telling, people will find that content, people will find your stories, and will support you no matter what. And it's also about supporting other people.
Yes, I want to echo everybody and not repeat what everyone's saying, but my husband always says the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I feel that the Filipinos have we've always oiled our wheels and never spoken up for generations. And I feel that we have to really be outspoken and fight for our stories to be told, fight for our faces to be on screen, and then fight for us to be behind the scenes also helming these stories. And I think that, as Ruby said, the audiences have to show up, because we have to have the numbers to prove that there is a thirst and demand for our stories. Because when it's a kind of like this, like this like number that you can't say, no one believes you. So I feel that once we have oh, my voice broke because I was so passionate about that. Once we have that passion and the science behind it, the numbers of how many people want to see the stories, and the numbers for people actually turning up, paying for a ticket, paying for an album, I think that people will want to fund our stories more and more, and hopefully we can change the tide, and this will be like a normal thing instead of something that we're hoping for to happen really soon. So the last question I want to ask everybody, and thank God VC gave me a little bit of wiggle room of time so I could do this, because I was getting like hives from like being like, oh my God, it's 6 o'clock. And I want to know, because I know everybody, as we said, as Evelyn said, we're all hobbyists and we have our finger in many pies. I want to know what everyone is working on next. And if you're working on something that someone can find online, please promote it. I want people who are just exposed to your work now to be able to find your work moving forward. So everybody, starting with Jess and going back to the original order, what's everyone working on next?
For me, a lot, but the one that I'm most excited about is my first feature, and it's called Dead Girl. It's a buddy comedy with me and Sherry Cola. We've gotten pretty far in the process, and the pandemic kind of put things on hold, as it did for everybody, but I'm really excited about that. Hopefully we would shoot that once this is over. I'm writing a bunch of other stuff. I have another feature that's set in Detroit that I've been working on for the past 6 years. That one's a little bit more ambitious, so that's taking a little bit more time. That one's called Chicken Shit. You'll remember that forever.
You have to say that it just got into Cannes. You have to say
that. Well, so that's
no big deal.
Canceled though, like Cannes canceled. So, well, it's a pitching event at Cannes where you can pitch to this big group of financiers. And I was really excited to go, but I don't know if I will get to anymore. But yeah, it's still really cool to be included in that. So things are moving. I'm excited to work on. I'm just really excited to start working on features. Like I've been working on shorts forever because that's the easiest thing to do as a budding filmmaker, but a feature really like defines you as a filmmaker, and I think I'm ready for that step, and I have been for a while, so I'm gonna do that next.
I'm gonna just prod you for one more thing. You just made, but you have a short coming out at the end of the year, right?
Right, Phony. Yeah, that was also supposed to show at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, right? That one is called Phony. It's a short that I made with Paul Feig and his production company called Powder Keg. And I'm really excited about that. It's another Filipino story about me and my very Filipino mom. And we just go on this nightmare grocery shopping errand. And I'm really excited about that. Excited to see what you guys will think of it. If you relate to it. I'm sure you will, because they're all the same. But yeah, thanks for reminding me that I had that.
You're welcome. Paola, what are you working on next?
Oh man, to be honest with you, we just finished the last season of Long Distance, and it feels like we've been working on it for like the whole year, because we were in this thing called the Google Podcast Creator Program. It took all year of last year, so it's been nonstop podcast world like all year, which it's been great and fun, but I mean with this pandemic, it's made me have to like slow down and kind of assess how this past season has gone. But we do have some stories in the works. The Louisiana story I've been working on, and a couple other things, trying to figure out kind of next steps for a third season, funding, fun things like that. But honestly, Patrick, we're collaborators, and we're also working on some film and TV projects. So I'm actually writing maybe some visual stuff. We'll see. And he's developing a film. So I'm excited about that too. And if you want to follow any long distance stuff, we're on Instagram at Long Distance Radio.
Awesome. Ruby?
For me, I'm steadily chipping away at my sophomore album that I'm still hoping to drop this year, aiming for October, Filipina American History Month. Me and Evelyn are also working on our 7,000 Miles documentary, which I think she's going to talk a little bit more about. And on top of that, since I love documentaries so much, we've also been filming behind the scenes of the making of my sophomore album. And the reason for that is I've been working with my live band for the last year and a half. And just with the approach of the next album, I've had sessions with a multitude of amazing musicians, and having this live component for the next record, I think it was important for me to capture the collaboration behind the scenes. So I'm looking forward to releasing that at the same time with the album, and also a couple other things in the works, but I can't talk on yet. But I do want to work with everyone on this panel.
Yeah, Tess, we should probably get that brunch thing started together. So adding on to what Ruby was sharing, I actually committed a lot of my videography to just fully dedicating it to Ruby. And as you know, she's quite the busy woman, not just as a musician, but also just as a person. She is a scientist in her day job, if you didn't already know. And so we moonlight doing our side hustles. So me in film, day job in tech, and then Ruby in biotech, and then moonlighting and everything else. So it's been fun. On top of what I work on with Ruby, recently I'm working on a project with the San Francisco Entertainment and Arts Commission. And I was just tapped to hopefully document more of the stories and narratives of small businesses and the impact of COVID on their businesses and the types of decisions they have to make amid the lack of an audience and social distancing. So excited for that to roll out. And more recently, I might need to ask you, Marie, and you, Paola, who've both worked with your partners. Me and my partner just launched a TikTok account where we hope to unpack being in a biracial relationship, but also our tagline is where culture meets kawaii. And so we hope to unpack content, and the audience on this platform is obviously very Gen Z. And so we're hoping to dig into some deep stuff, but in a lighthearted way. So excited for these projects.
Amazing. Tess?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the super vague zone too. I have been developing an unscripted comedy series with a network that again has been put on hold because of the quarantine. But I'm really excited once we are able to get filming. It'll be really great, and I'll be having to ask for a lot of help. So in the meantime, if everyone wants to follow on social media at Tess Paras on Instagram and Twitter. But in the meantime, I've been writing some scripted projects, and I also have another short that I want to do eventually once we're all allowed to be together again. But yes, just in development mode right now.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But wait, don't go off, everyone, because I have some announcements, and fun announcements. For next Saturday at this time, 5 p.m. PST, join us, so May 16, for Cinema Sala presents Cine Diaz, where we sit down with the award-winning filmmaker Ramona Diaz. I'm very excited about this. So I hope that everybody can make it for that one. Her work is streaming right now on Eventive, and please follow at Cinema_Sala at Instagram or on Facebook. Be sure to check out the Monday Night VC Past Pacifica Shorts program, where VC celebrates 3 films centered around our native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. And for more information on visual communications, please check out the website vcmedia.org. Thank you so much for people at VC, Francis and Asil, for helping me have this panel. Finally, it's a year in the making, have this conversation with these amazingly talented women. It's a dream come true for me. I'm so happy to be finally sharing this works. I can talk with you ladies for another 5 hours, but let's be considerate, and I want to get drunk. So,
Marie, do you have projects to share?
Yeah,
I was just filmmaker. Tell us what you're working on.
It's not about me.
I'm interviewing you now.
Oh, okay. Just I had a recent short film called Harana, which I hope to be sharing with you at the end of the year at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival when it happens. I made that this year while I was 8 months pregnant, and had picture lock once, and then 4 days after picture lock, I gave birth. So my life has been kind of like a whirlwind because of that. But aside from Harana, I've been developing some things as well, like on the TV and feature film front. And because of this pandemic, a lot of the things are also on hold. So I feel you girls. I feel you. It's very frustrating. Like there's something like suddenly a green light happens and then like no, and then they just put like all these barriers. It's like sorry,
For real.
no, it's not real. So hopefully we get the opportunity to move forward with our careers once this all happens. But I think while this is happening, writing is really the best. Writing is our friend right now, and just supporting each other in terms of our existing work is very important. And going back to the back catalogs and catching up. So everybody, please check out Long Distance. And then everybody who has works online, of course, you have Ruby's music online, and everybody's got a Vimeo account. Please check out everybody's work. It's been wonderful, and ingat everybody.
Thank
Stay safe.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
How do I leave?